Well, hello and welcome to episode 20 of You with Jesus. If you were Jesus, what would your first miracle be? I look at the world and maybe I'd choose a complete cessation of all global conflict right now. That'd be a nice place to start. Or I'd feed all the world's hungry people and selfishly I might solve all of Sydney's traffic headaches in an instant. So, what was Jesus' first miracle? Changing water to wine at a wedding. Interesting. Let's read what happened. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. What an extraordinary story. And there are so many layers going on here, as there often are, when the Gospel author John writes his accounts of Jesus' interactions. Interestingly, this story only appears in John's Gospel, and it is in the context of signs, which is one of the significant themes in John. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory. John records 7 of these signs of Jesus in the first part of the Gospel, and later says these are recorded so that people might believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that believing they may have life in his name. The Gospel of John is bookended by this idea that Jesus came, revealed his glory, some people believed and received, whilst others rejected. John is careful to select 7 specific signs which point to Jesus' glory, with the purpose that his readers might believe, and that by believing they might have life in his name. It's the kind of believing that leads to life. So after John records this particular sign about Jesus turning the water into wine, he writes, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So there's the sign, water to wine, the revelation of his glory, and the response. In this case, his disciples believed in him. And the way John uses that word believed is a loaded word in this gospel. It means much more than giving mental assent to something being true. It is a full recognition of who Jesus is in all his glory, involving a personal receiving of him. It's believing in his name. It's a reliance on his character. So how does Jesus reveal his glory in this passage? Let's take a look. The wedding they have been invited to is in Cana, just down the road from Jesus' hometown of Nazareth. So lots of community and family connections. And so Jesus, his mother, his family, and all the disciples have been invited to this wedding. They've run out of wine. Weddings ran for a whole week in that culture, and presumably more and more people just kept turning up. So either more people turned up than expected, or they drank more than imagined, or the groom's family couldn't afford to buy more wine, or the master of the banquet was a bit stingy. Whatever the case, they've run out. And Jesus' mother comes to him and says, they've run out of wine. And thus follows a rather enigmatic encounter between Jesus and his mother. She doesn't directly tell him what to do. She just presents the problem to him. But the suggestion is that she knew that he could solve the problem. Jesus calls her out on it. Why do you involve me? Now, don't be offended by the use of the word woman here. We often read our own cultural usage of words into text like this, but it isn't meant to be read as a put down to his mother. The exact translation carries with it this sense of gentleness, tenderness, and respect. So he's asking, why do you involve me? Maybe knowing full well why she is involving him. Jesus has this way of asking questions in a rhetorical or designed to prompt the inquirer to take the next step. It's as though he's pushing back on the person's approach to him to see what's behind the comment or to get to the heart of where the person's coming from. It's also why he talks in parables. There's an element of mystery, and you've got to be a genuine seeker in order to really understand. So at first, Jesus rejects the inference that he should be involved in solving the problem and follows it up with the phrase, "My hour has not yet come." This is the first of 9 references in John's Gospel to my hour or my time. Each of the other references is speaking specifically about Jesus' death and resurrection. That would be the hour, the time, when Jesus' mission would be fulfilled, when his glory would be on full display, the purpose for which he had come to earth would culminate in that moment. Jesus' response to his mother indicates that he doesn't want to peak too early. It's as if Jesus' mother ignores this hesitation and says simply to the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. Now, this is a remarkable interaction. It suggests Mary knew full well that somehow Jesus was going to solve the problem, but there's no indication that she knew how he was going to solve the problem. This makes me think that sometimes we have requests of God, but rather than just telling him what our needs are and then letting him solve the issue in his way and in his time, it's us who are telling God how the problem should be solved. Mary doesn't do that. She says, do whatever he tells you. If we're too occupied telling Jesus how to solve our issues, we run the risk of missing out on the something better. One thing I love about Jesus' miracles is how he involves others. Someone who can turn water into wine doesn't need the servants to fill the jars with water. He doesn't even need jars. He doesn't need servants to distribute the wine. He could simply have magically filled up all the empty cups. Oh, wow. He could have avoided human intermediaries altogether. But as we go through the events and the miracles of Jesus' ministry, I want you to notice how many times he deliberately engages others in being part of the answer. So there's these 6 large ceremonial jars lying around, the kind that the Jews use for ceremonial washing, and it's them that are filled with water. In our next session, I want us to dip back into the Old Testament and look more at ceremonial washing. But for now, it's enough to note that Jesus drew the water, or was it the wine, from ceremonial washing jars. I did the maths, and that's the equivalent of around 800 bottles of wine. So they first go to the master of the banquet, who probably has been contracted by the bridegroom's family as the event manager and caterer for the wedding. Check out this episode on The Chosen. They do a very good job of dramatising the context. The master of the banquet, he tries the wine, draws the bridegroom aside and says with a nudge and a wink, nicely played, young man. Most people are bringing out the cheap stuff after the guests have had a few. Look at you, saving the best till last. He must have been like, what are you talking about? But then he says, oh, yeah, right, yeah, of course. Well, that's the kind of guy I am. Who knows what he said? But this small detail of the wine being the best wine is not lost on the gospel writer. John is always very deliberate in his choice of words and in the stories to choose to tell. He doesn't just want bullet point notes on Jesus' life, like then he went here and he did this and this happened. John is always looking to add layer upon layer upon layer, just like the old Sarah Lee ad. Jesus' answer to the need for more wine isn't just to provide more wine, but to provide the best wine, to provide it last and from water, which is in ceremonial jars. And in doing all of that, he reveals his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. And along the way, a lot of people get to have a lot more fun. And the bridegroom, well, he gets to save face and live happily ever after. My purpose in presenting the year with Jesus is to draw attention to who Jesus is. And perhaps a little bit like John, My purpose in doing so is that you might believe in him, and that by believing in him, you might have life in his name. This story represents the kind of person Jesus is. He is someone who is always bringing better things. He brings the best into our lives. Whatever disappointments you may have had in your past, at whatever age you happen to be, believing in Jesus comes with the promise that the best is yet to come. See you in the next episode.